you are. Mercy waiting just beyond my door.
John Paul II said, "In the mercy of God, the world will find peace and the mankind will find happiness."
Often our trials and sufferings and traumas that we might experience in our life are permeated, and this is a great mystery, but they're permeated with mercy. John Paul II reminds us that Christ didn't come to abolish all suffering from the world, but to fill all suffering with his presence. Jesus is desirous of a radical being with us in every moment. And so I heard it once said that your story is his glory. You ever hear that? So here goes. In 1999, I nearly drowned in the Florida Everglades surrounded by alligators. It's like nightmare fuel, right? But it's true. I was 21, and at that time in my life, things seemed to be going really great. I was at art school. I was the top of my class. I was getting basically straight A's, almost straight A's. I was receiving all these painting awards. I didn't really hit the party scene like my friends did. I was so committed to work, to being the best at what I was doing. I was a super hard worker. And so from the surface, everything looked like it was great. But under the surface was a whole lot of stuff that I had never dealt with in my life. One of the most catastrophic things was before the age of 9, I came into pornography, and it just latched onto my imagination to the extent that I was looking at it, seeking it out, and all the other sexual sins. By around the time of the age of 10, I was thoroughly addicted. And that began to color my life going forward. I had many traumatic experiences during my life that, not to mention here. And at that time, when I was 21, I had experienced the first crushing breakup. I don't know if you've ever had one of those, but it was the first absolutely world-crushing breakup of the girl that I thought I was going to marry. But I wasn't dealing with any of this stuff. I was just working hard. I was completely self-reliant. Sometimes when we get to be really wounded in our life, we begin to distrust ourselves, we distrust others. And so the temptation to self-reliance, to do everything on our own, is real, and that was happening to me. So what happened on that fateful weekend was my friends who were in a fraternity decided that it was a great idea to rent some canoes, get half dozen cases of beer, and go out and just get completely smashed in the Everglades. Now, I grew up in Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. I've been on loads of high-adventure backpacking trips in the glaciers in Canada, Montana, all over the United States. So I thought of myself as somewhat of a survivalist, I could manage. And I was totally convinced they were all going to die. I was like, you guys don't understand. This place is filled with alligators. Some of them are big enough to want to eat you. There are bears, which was a shock to them. There's also panthers. There's all kinds of snakes. There's all kinds of stuff that wants to eat you. And they were just like, it's going to be all right. We're going to go out. We're going to get totally hammered. It's going to be great for the weekend. So reluctantly, I decided to go along with them because I thought I'll save them from dying because they're definitely going to die. Fast forward, we got to the Everglades. Not only did they get us a canoeing outfit to get us deep into the Everglades, but there was the only way through the Everglades at that point was with maps. None of them knew how to read a compass. This was before cell phones, right? Before any of us had cell phones. We were going to go out into the complete wilderness, off the grid, so to speak, with cases of beer, and that's it. So we pushed off into the river, and there was about 5 canoes, and not even a quarter mile down the river, we started seeing gators lining the sides of the river on both sides, big guys. And that was about the time that my friends started to freak out. They're like, I didn't know they were so big. I'm like, guys, I'm telling you, this isn't Disneyland. We're in a serious place. And so we're canoeing down the river. It's hot. Everybody starts just drinking and drinking while they're canoeing. I'm staying completely sober because, again, I'm like, I'm going to save all these guys from sure death. Within about a half a mile down the river, a couple of the canoes get really rowdy and they flip into the water. This is a big concern because they had all of our camping gear, which was floating now down the Florida Everglades. There was also 4 guys in the water with alligators sliding in. So I quickly got all my rescue behavior going. I tied a bowline, which is a loop that doesn't slip. It's a rescue knot. So I'm throwing out these lassos. I'm pulling the guys in. I'm like, I told you so. I get them all into the canoes. I'm so angry. I was like, we've got to get out of here. We have no camping equipment. Their great idea was, again, to continue to stay out camping, drink beer, and sleep under the stars in this place. So I was like, absolutely not. We're getting out of here. So what I did was I lashed all the canoes together with that rope. I rescued everybody, got everybody into the boat. Everybody's completely hammered. It's like 100 degrees. We lashed all the canoes together in like a raft, and we're just floating down the river. We decided to find the first place that we could get off, and then we would try to walk someplace for help. We're miles away from help. We get to the portage spot where we can get off. I untie all the canoes. Most of the guys canoe to the shore, except the guy in my canoe, who was my best friend at the time. And he starts rocking the canoe. He's like, Mikey's afraid of the water. Mikey's afraid of alligators. He starts rocking the canoe. I'm like, dude, do not tip this canoe, because the current was moving pretty quick. The Florida Everglades, and that part of the glades, the water is very murky. It's brown. You cannot see. Like if you put your finger in, you couldn't see the tip of your finger in the water. It's brown, and it's moving. Well, long story short, he tips the canoe. We capsize. We go on. We flip. My first thought is he's drunk. I get him on top of the canoe, and I start trying to kick the canoe towards the side of the river. For some reason, I made a decision as I was getting close to the riverside to try to push the canoe. I don't know what that was going to do. But I, with all my energy, I pushed the canoe as hard as I could. So I thought maybe I could get some propulsion and float him to the side. But what it did was it had a counter action. When I pushed the canoe that way in the water, it pushed me out. And it was just enough for my feet to catch the current that was underneath the surface. And I was zipped down the river. Have you ever seen the Florida Everglades, at least in pictures? Maybe? Okay. Along the sides of the Florida Everglades are mangrove trees. If you can imagine like gnarled root systems kind of just going like fingers all along the riverbanks. I'm struggling against the current because I don't want to be in this water for obvious reasons. As I'm floating down the river, I'm seeing gators on all sides of the riverbank notice me and then slide in. The problem here is that you can't see anything, and you're also they're under their complete control. I was fighting against the current so hard that I became so exhausted that I could barely move. It was very dangerous. But I finally got to the mangroves, and I was trying to climb my way out with whatever energy that I had, and my sandals that I was wearing got hooked underneath the water in the root systems. And every time the river swelled, it would pull me under, so that I was just like this far from the surface, but I could not get my face above. When the current would release, I could come up, get a breath, and then it would pull me under again. I heard my friend Jay running down the riverbank screaming my name, like under the water. I could hear him. And I'm trying to reach up to grab onto anything, but I didn't have the strength to pull myself up. I was waiting for the bite, I was waiting for it because I was struggling. I was in the mangroves, which is right where they usually grab prey. And as I was under the water, just under the surface, I could see the sun. I just remember my arm holding on to something, and all of a sudden, this huge, strong arm. My friend Jay was like 6'3", like at least 250, like solid muscle, like jacked guy, right? He just reaches down, grabs me like around the armpit, and rips me out of the mangrove with one arm. Rips my sandals off my feet. That's how strong he ripped me out of there. He saved me. And that image of the strong arm reaching into the muddy water amidst unknown predators. I don't know if there were any near me. They could have been 2 inches from me. I would have had no idea. But they were in there. That image has been like a metaphor for my life. The image of a relationship with Christ. Maybe it could be one for you. John Paul II said, "The cross means there is no shipwreck without hope, there is no dark without dawn, and no storm without haven." What God showed me in that part of my life where I was very far from Him, had no clue about God, was not brought up in the church, is that He would save me from death. But something further than that is also that God would heal me in this life. After that event, a lot of things happened in my life. I had friends that contracted different STDs. One of my close friends had an abortion. I had continual falls with porn and sexual sin. The ongoing pain of this broken relationship. And at that time, I'm a painter. All my art became really dark and gothic, just dark and gothic. And I remember one night, laying in my bed in my apartment, looking up at the ceiling, and it was something of a prayer, but I'd never really prayed before. I was like, what is the point of life? Like, I almost died, but what is that? What's after this? Like, what's the point of sex and relationships and art? I was having like an actual crisis. Again, all these things I hadn't been dealing with in my entire life were coming to the surface because of nearly dying. The next morning, I decided I got to get out of here, and I went to the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, Florida, near where I went to school. And I was walking through a hall of Rembrandt paintings, and I came across this. This is an image called the Blue Madonna. You can see it way in the back. Okay, by Carlo Dolci. He was, as far as I'm able to find out, he was an apprentice, or at least a art friend of Rembrandt, which is why he was in that same gallery. But let me just hold it up again. She'll help me out. I stood in front of this image, and for some reason, I looked at this. I thought, this is the picture of the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. I was so attracted to her in a way that was so pure. And I've seen, with the porn addiction, I had seen so many women. It's horrible. But with this, it was like I saw a woman for the first time. And she was completely in darkness, except for this like little sliver of light over her face, and it felt like my life. What happened was, shockingly, I began to like weep in this museum with everybody walking by. Like not like a regular cry, but like one of those really ugly cries, with snot and all that stuff. Like it was bad. But what was going on was like my entire life was just coming out. All the trauma, all of the disparagement I had towards myself, all the questions, this near-death experience. And I experienced what John Paul II said, that from the depth of human suffering, a cry for mercy rises up. When I came to find out is that there was no depth that I could fall to in my life. There was no danger that I could encounter, no pain or wound, that Christ hadn't already gone to that depth and further, so that he was already there. So I began to look for him there. I began to look for him in the place of my woundedness. Why was I attracted and looking for porn? Where were you when the alligators were there? You can see your own story. There's too much to say about Christ's mercy in 20 minutes. Suffice to say, I'll let Faustina say something then. All grace flows from mercy in your life. Our last hour abounds with mercy for us, whenever that will be. Do not doubt the goodness of God. Even if your sins are dark as night, God's mercy is stronger than your misery. Only one thing alone is necessary: that you set ajar the door of your heart, even if ever so little, to let in a ray of God's beautiful grace. And God will do the rest.
And you are mercy waiting just beyond my door.
John Paul II said, in the mercy of God, the world will find peace and the mankind will find happiness.